Millionaire disguises himself as a plumber, and what he discovers about his wife. Marcus Bennett always believed he knew the woman he had married 10 years ago. A successful businessman in the construction industry, he spent weeks traveling through Southern California, supervising his projects, trusting that his mansion in Beverly Hills was under the loving care of Elizabeth, his red-haired wife, with a charming smile. Everything changed on Tuesday morning when he received an anonymous call on his cell phone. The female voice, hesitant and nervous, whispered words that cut his heart like a knife. "Mr. Marcus, you need to know how your wife treats the people who work in your home. Please find out the truth before it's too late." The call ended before he could respond. Marcus stood still at the construction site, phone in hand, feeling a strange chill run down his spine. Why would someone call anonymously to talk about Elizabeth? His wife had always been sweet and polite, at least in his presence. But something in that desperate voice deeply troubled him. Throughout the week, he couldn't get that call out of his head. Elizabeth remained the same caring wife as always, asking about his work, preparing his favorite dinners, and caring for their 10-year-old son, Tyler. But Marcus began to notice small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The housekeeper, Sarah, a 25-year-old woman who had worked in the house for 2 years, always kept her eyes down when he arrived. Before, Marcus thought it was natural shyness, but now he sensed something different in that evasive gaze. There was fear there, a tension he had never noticed before. On Thursday, another call came. "Mr. Marcus, it's me again. I know you must think it's a lie, but please investigate. Miss Sarah is suffering a lot. Your wife, she changes when you're not around." This time, Marcus tried to keep the person on the line. "Who are you? Why are you telling me this? I worked in your house before. I left because I couldn't take it anymore. But Sarah needs the job. She has a family to support. That's why she doesn't have the courage to leave." The call ended again, leaving Marcus with even more questions. He began to observe Elizabeth more closely, looking for signs of the behavior described by the anonymous calls. On the surface, everything seemed normal, but there were moments when he caught furtive glances between Elizabeth and Sarah, a tension in the air that he couldn't explain. On Sunday, during family lunch, Marcus noticed something that intrigued him. Sarah had accidentally broken a glass while serving juice. It was just an ordinary glass costing very little, but Elizabeth's reaction was disproportionate. "My God, Sarah, how can you be so clumsy?" exclaimed Elizabeth, with a harshness in her voice that Marcus wasn't used to hearing. This glass was part of the dining room set. Marcus knew that wasn't true. The glass was from the kitchen, not the expensive dining room set. But what bothered him most was the expression of terror on Sarah's face, as if she had made a terrible mistake. "It was no big deal, honey," said Marcus, trying to ease the situation. "These things happen." Elizabeth forced a smile, but Marcus saw the angry glint in her green eyes. "Of course, dear. I just got startled." "Sorry, Sarah." But when Marcus looked at Sarah, he saw that the young housekeeper didn't seem convinced by the sincerity of that apology. There was something in her eyes, a resignation that suggested episodes like that were more common than he imagined. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The anonymous calls, Elizabeth's exaggerated reaction, the fear in Sarah's eyes, all of this created a disturbing puzzle in his mind. He needed to uncover the truth, but how? The answer came the following Monday, when one of the plumbers hired for a renovation in one of his buildings mentioned working in high-end residences. "It's funny, Dr. Marcus," the man said, wiping his hands with a cloth. "You see it all when working in rich people's homes. Some bosses treat us like people, and others act like we're invisible. And then there are the lady bosses. Some are worse than the men." The plumber's casual remark planted a seed in Marcus's mind. If he truly wanted to discover how Elizabeth behaved in his absence, he would need to be present without her knowing. He would need to become invisible in his own home. The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more Marcus thought about it, the more feasible it became. He knew several outsourcing companies that provided maintenance services for high-end residences. Would it be possible to infiltrate as a temporary worker? The mansion always needed minor repairs and maintenance. Elizabeth wouldn't suspect if a company sent a plumber to check some issues with the piping. During the following week, Marcus meticulously planned his investigation. He contacted David Thompson, the owner of a plumbing company he didn't know personally, explaining that he needed someone very discreet for a special job. He didn't reveal his real identity, presenting himself only as someone who needed to investigate possible irregularities in a residence. David, intrigued but professional, agreed to help. Marcus would be temporarily registered as John Williams, an experienced plumber who would conduct a full assessment of the mansion's piping. The false identity was carefully constructed, with temporary documents and a plausible backstory. "Just one thing, Doctor," David said, using the respectful address, even without knowing Marcus's true identity. "If you're going to uncover something wrong in that house, be careful. Sometimes the truth hurts more than ignorance." David's words echoed in Marcus's mind as he prepared for the transformation. He bought simple work clothes, a worn-out cap, and a box of basic tools. He studied plumbing technical vocabulary and practiced a simpler accent, different from his usual educated speech. The night before the charade began, Marcus watched Elizabeth dining calmly, laughing at something Tyler had told her about school. She seemed genuinely happy and affectionate. For a moment he questioned if he wasn't being paranoid, if the anonymous calls weren't just tasteless jokes or misunderstandings. But when Sarah entered the room to clear the dishes, Marcus noticed again that subtle tension. The way the young woman moved with excessive care, as if any sudden movement could trigger a negative reaction. Elizabeth didn't even look at her, treating her like a piece of furniture moving through the house. "Tomorrow I'm traveling to San Diego," Marcus lied to Elizabeth the next morning. "A problem came up at the new construction site. I'll need to stay there for a few days." Elizabeth kissed his forehead affectionately. "Be careful, dear. We'll be fine here. Sarah will take care of everything properly, won't she?" Marcus looked at Sarah, who only nodded silently, but there was something in her expression he couldn't quite decipher. 2 hours later, Marcus parked his car a few blocks away from his own house and walked to the mansion wearing David's company green uniform. He carried a borrowed toolbox and felt his heart pounding in his chest. In a few minutes, he would discover if his suspicions were founded or if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. As he rang the doorbell of his own home, Marcus took a deep breath. When the door opened, revealing Sarah with a surprised expression, he said in an altered voice, "Good morning, miss. I'm John from Thompson Plumbing. I'm here to assess the house's plumbing. The lady of the house must be expecting me." Sarah looked at him strangely for a moment, as if something about his features was familiar, but soon the recognition faded. "One moment, please," she said, disappearing into the house. Marcus heard muffled voices coming from inside the mansion, and soon Elizabeth appeared at the door. Her red hair was tied in an elegant ponytail, and she wore a red dress that enhanced her natural beauty. But there was something different in her posture, a stiffness that Marcus wasn't used to seeing. "We didn't request any plumbing service," said Elizabeth, looking Marcus up and down with suspicion. Marcus remained calm, following the script he had prepared. "Mrs. Elizabeth Bennett, your husband called our company last week. He said he was having issues with the water pressure in the main bathroom and asked us to send someone to take a look while he was traveling." Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, clearly trying to remember if Marcus had mentioned anything about plumbing. Finally, she sighed with irritation. "My husband always forgets to tell me these things. All right, you can come in, but be quick. I have appointments today." Marcus entered his own home as a stranger, feeling surreal as he was led by Elizabeth, as if he were just any worker. She didn't even look him in the eye, treating him with the indifference reserved for service providers. "Sarah, show him where the main bathroom is," ordered Elizabeth, with a coldness that startled Marcus. "And keep an eye on him. I don't want anyone messing with our things." The way Elizabeth referred to Sarah, as if she were just any employee and not someone who had been working in their home for 2 years, already gave Marcus a small taste of what was to come. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Sarah led Marcus to the main bathroom, maintaining a respectful distance. He noticed how she walked, always attentive to noises coming from other rooms, as if constantly alert to Elizabeth's presence. "Could you show me exactly what the problem is?" asked Marcus, trying to keep his voice altered. "Actually, I don't really know," whispered Sarah, looking nervously behind her. "Mrs. Elizabeth told me to tell you it was a pressure issue, but to me it seems everything's normal." Marcus pretended to examine the faucet and shower, but he was actually observing Sarah. The young employee fidgeted nervously with her hands and seemed always ready to run off. There was a palpable tension in her every movement. "Have you been working here long?" asked Marcus, trying to make conversation. Sarah hesitated before answering, as if even talking to visitors was problematic. 2 years, she replied quietly. "It's a good job. The family is—" She stopped abruptly, as if she had almost said something she shouldn't have. At that moment, Elizabeth's shrill voice echoed through the hallway. "Sarah, where are you? You're not supposed to be chatting with the plumber." Sarah's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face visibly paled, and she straightened up like a soldier called to attention. "Excuse me," she murmured to Marcus, quickly leaving the bathroom. Marcus heard Elizabeth scolding Sarah in the hallway, her voice filled with irritation. "How many times do I have to tell you not to chat with strangers? You're here to work, not to socialize. If I catch you chatting again, there will be a pay cut." "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth," came Sarah's submissive reply. "I was just explaining where the problem was." "No need to explain anything. Let the man work and go tend to your duties, and while you're at it, clean that room again. I saw dust on the shelf." Marcus felt his blood boil as he heard the way Elizabeth treated Sarah. The harshness, the threat of a pay cut over an innocent conversation, the authoritarian tone. None of it matched the caring woman he knew. He came out of the bathroom carrying his toolbox, pretending he needed to check the plumbing in other parts of the house. Elizabeth was in the living room, flipping through a decorating magazine, while Sarah obsessively cleaned a shelf that already looked spotless. "I need to take a look in the kitchen too," Marcus said to Elizabeth. "Sometimes the pressure problem comes from the main plumbing." Elizabeth didn't even look up from the magazine. "Do whatever is necessary. Just don't take too long." Marcus headed to the kitchen, but strategically stopped in the hallway, where he could hear the conversation in the living room. What he witnessed in the following minutes made his stomach turn. "Sarah, this dust is still here," said Elizabeth, running her finger along the shelf. "Did you clean or just pretend to clean?" "I did clean, Mrs. Elizabeth. Maybe it accumulated again from the wind from the window. Don't give me excuses. Either you clean properly or you'll have to learn how to clean. Do it again, and this time use the right products. And close that window. It seems like you don't have the sense to think." Marcus watched through the crack in the door as Sarah lowered her head and went back to cleaning the shelf in silence. There were tears glistening in her eyes, but she held them back with a skill that suggested years of practice in hiding her emotions. What shocked Marcus the most was the naturalness with which Elizabeth exercised this psychological cruelty. It wasn't a moment of stress or temporary irritation. It was a pattern of systematic and calculated behavior. He entered the kitchen trying to process what he was seeing. The woman he had married, the mother of his son, was capable of systematically humiliating an employee who depended on that job to survive. "Is there any problem here in the kitchen too?" asked Sarah, appearing at the door a few minutes later. Marcus noticed that she had quickly dried her eyes before entering, but there were still traces of tears on her face. "Just checking," he said softly, trying to convey some comfort through his tone of voice. "Are you okay?" Sarah looked at him with surprise, as if she wasn't used to expressions of concern. "Yes, sir. Why do you ask?" "You seem tired." For a moment, Sarah seemed to want to say something, but she quickly composed herself. "It's just normal work. A big house is a lot of work." Marcus wanted to say something more, offer some kind of support, but he knew it could compromise his investigation and possibly worsen Sarah's situation. At that moment, Tyler came running into the kitchen, still wearing his school uniform. "Hi, Sarah. I'm so glad you're here. Mommy said you were going to make that chocolate cake today." The transformation on Sarah's face was instant. Seeing Tyler, she smiled genuinely for the first time since Marcus had arrived. "Hi, Tyler. Of course I'll make it. Did you just get home from school?" "Yes. Did you run through the math test?" asked the boy, climbing onto one of the kitchen chairs. Yes, I did. I'm sure you did very well. Marcus watched the interaction between Sarah and his son with a mix of tenderness and concern. It was clear that there was genuine affection between them, but he also noticed how Sarah kept glancing nervously at the door, always alert for Elizabeth's arrival. "Who is this man?" asked Tyler, noticing Marcus for the first time. "It's the plumber, dear," Sarah answered quickly. "He came to fix some problems in the house." Tyler waved at Marcus with the natural friendliness of children, and Marcus waved back, feeling a pang of guilt for deceiving his own son. "Tyler," Elizabeth's voice sounded from the hallway, "where are you?" The change in the atmosphere was immediate. Sarah straightened up again, and even Tyler seemed to compose himself. "I'm here, Mum!" the boy shouted. Elizabeth appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Marcus noticed how her expression hardened upon seeing Sarah talking with Tyler. "Tyler, let's go. You have homework to do. And Sarah, when you're done chatting, remember there's laundry to iron." "But, Mum, Sarah said she was going to make a chocolate cake," protested Tyler. "She'll make it after she finishes her duties. Now come on." Marcus watched Elizabeth take Tyler away, but not before giving Sarah a warning look. The message was clear: less talk, more work. Alone in the kitchen with Sarah, Marcus felt torn between the desire to reveal his identity and the need to continue investigating. He chose to try to extract more information subtly. "The lady of the house seems quite demanding," he commented, pretending to adjust something in the piping under the sink. Sarah glanced nervously at the door before answering. "She just wants everything to be perfect. It's understandable." Sarah's diplomatic response revealed as much as her unspoken words. Marcus could tell she had learned to protect herself with neutral answers. "Do you have family?" asked Marcus, trying to change the subject. Sarah's face lit up slightly. "I have a younger sister. She lives with me." "Does she work too?" "No, she has some limitations. She was born with problems in her right leg, but she's very smart, studies on her own, and helps me with some things at home." Marcus felt a pang of admiration for Sarah. Besides enduring the hostile work environment, she also supported and cared for a sister with a disability. "That must be difficult," he remarked. "We manage," replied Sarah, with a determination that touched Marcus's heart. "The important thing is being together." At that moment, Elizabeth reappeared in the kitchen, and the change in the atmosphere was palpable. "Sarah, where's that dish towel I told you to wash yesterday?" "It's drying on the clothesline, Mrs. Elizabeth. It should be ready in an hour." "An hour? Why didn't you put it out to dry this morning? Now I'll have to use another one. Go and get one from the storage closet." "But, Mrs. Elizabeth, the gentleman is using the kitchen now," said Sarah, gesturing discreetly toward Marcus. "So what? He's not going to bite you. Go get the towel I need now." Marcus watched Elizabeth leave the kitchen impatiently, leaving Sarah visibly embarrassed for having to interrupt his work. "Sorry," murmured Sarah to Marcus. "It won't take long." "Don't worry," he replied, but his blood was boiling at the unnecessarily authoritarian way Elizabeth had treated Sarah. When Sarah left to get the towel, Marcus heard Elizabeth talking on the phone in the living room. He discreetly approached to listen. "Oh, friend, you have no idea how hard it is to keep these maids in line," Elizabeth was saying with a casual tone that made Marcus freeze. "Sarah is a good employee, but she needs a firm hand. If you give them an inch, they slack off right away." "How so?" asked a female voice on the other end of the line. "Oh, you know how it is. You have to keep an eye on them, correct them when they mess up, show them who's in charge. Otherwise, they think they can do anything." Marcus felt nauseous hearing Elizabeth talk about Sarah as if she were an animal to be tamed. "But does she work well?" asked the friend. "She does. But sometimes I think she plays the victim to get sympathy. The other day she started crying because I corrected her for breaking a glass." "A glass? Imagine if I took all her drama seriously." Marcus clenched his fists tightly. Elizabeth was boasting about making Sarah cry, as if it were a personal achievement. "Don't you think that's a bit too harsh?" asked her friend with some hesitation. "Harsh?" Elizabeth laughed. "Darling, if you don't set boundaries from the start, they'll walk all over you. Sarah earns well, has a place to live, guaranteed food. If she doesn't like the rules, she can look for another job." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Elizabeth detailing other situations where she had corrected Sarah, always with a tone of superiority that made Marcus feel physically sick. Sarah returned to the kitchen carrying the cloth Elizabeth had asked for, and Marcus noticed how she moved quickly, clearly anxious to complete the task as soon as possible. "Did you find everything okay?" he asked, trying to hide his indignation. "Yes, sir, sorry for the interruption." "Don't mention it. I'm the one who should apologize for disrupting your routine." Sarah looked at him in surprise. It was clear she wasn't used to apologies from people she considered her social superiors. Elizabeth entered the kitchen just as Sarah was handing over the cloth. "Did it take that long to get a cloth?" she asked irritably. "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth, I had to look in the cabinet and—" "I don't want to hear excuses. Next time, be faster." Marcus watched Sarah lower her head and accept the unfair scolding in silence. The situation was even more infuriating because Elizabeth was clearly exaggerating to impress him, showing her authority over the staff. "Will the service take long?" Elizabeth asked Marcus, in a tone that made it clear his presence was becoming inconvenient. "I'm almost done with the initial assessment," replied Marcus. "But I'll need to come back tomorrow with some replacement parts. The problem is a bit more complex than I initially thought." Elizabeth sighed irritably. "My husband always picks the worst times to handle these things." "Fine, but I want it finished quickly. I don't like strangers staying too long in my house." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Marcus. His own wife was referring to him as an unwanted stranger in his own home. "I understand perfectly, Ma'am. I'll be as quick as possible." Elizabeth left the kitchen, but not before giving Sarah one last scolding about something related to the cabinet organization. Marcus waited until he was sure Elizabeth was far away before addressing Sarah again. "Can I ask you a question?" he said quietly. Sarah looked at him cautiously. "Of course. Have you ever thought about looking for another job?" The question caught Sarah off guard, and Marcus saw a mix of emotions cross her face: sadness, frustration, and something that looked like longing. "Sometimes," she admitted in a whisper, "but it's not that simple. I need the money and domestic work is hard to find. Besides, here at least I know what to expect." "How so?" Sarah hesitated for a long time before answering. "Well, Mrs. Elizabeth can be a bit difficult at times, but she pays on time. There's a house for me to live in with my sister, and Dr. Marcus is a good person. When he's here, everything gets more calm." Sarah's last sentence made Marcus's heart tighten. It was clear that his presence in the house had some kind of moderating effect on Elizabeth's behavior, but he had no idea how much his absence allowed his wife to cruelly exert her power over the staff. "Does the boss travel a lot?" asked Marcus, trying to understand the dynamics better. "Quite a bit. He has many projects outside of Los Angeles. Sometimes he's away for weeks." Marcus began to understand the pattern. Elizabeth behaved civilly when he was present, but transformed into a domestic tyrant during his absences. This explained why he had never witnessed the behaviors described in the anonymous calls. "And how are things when he's not here?" Sarah glanced nervously at the door again before answering. "Different," was all she said, but the weight of the word carried volumes of unspoken meaning. Marcus wanted to press for more details, but knew he couldn't force Sarah to expose herself more than she felt comfortable doing. Instead, he decided to prolong his stay at the house to observe more behaviors. "I'll need to check the plumbing in the second-floor bathroom too," he announced to Elizabeth when she returned to the kitchen. "Are there problems there too?" she asked with growing irritation. "There might be. It's better to check everything at once to avoid future inconveniences." Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "Fine. Sarah, show him where it is." While climbing the stairs behind Sarah, Marcus took the opportunity to observe more details of the house that he had never noticed from an employee's perspective. There were security cameras in various locations, some of which he didn't remember authorizing the installation of. When he asked Sarah about them, her response was evasive. "Mrs. Elizabeth had them installed a few months ago," she said without looking directly at the cameras, "for security." But Marcus noticed that some cameras were positioned in ways that would allow monitoring of staff work rather than protection against outside intruders. This gave him an uncomfortable feeling of excessive surveillance. On the second floor, Marcus pretended to examine the plumbing in the guest bathroom while observing Sarah. She seemed more relaxed away from Elizabeth's direct presence, but still kept her guard up. "Can I ask you something more personal?" Marcus said, keeping his voice low. Sarah nodded hesitantly. "Are you happy working here?" The question touched something deep, and Marcus saw Sarah's eyes fill with tears that she quickly tried to hide. "Happiness is a luxury I can't afford," she finally replied. "I need to work. I need to take care of my sister. I can't think about happiness when I have responsibilities." Sarah's response revealed a maturity forced by circumstances, and Marcus felt deeply moved by the dignity with which she carried her difficulties. "But everyone deserves some happiness," he said softly. "Maybe," Sarah replied, discreetly wiping her eyes, "but survival comes first." At that moment, they heard Elizabeth shouting from downstairs. "Sarah, where are you? We have guests arriving and the living room needs to be perfect." The immediate panic on Sarah's face was revealing. She rushed out of the bathroom, leaving Marcus alone with his troubled thoughts. He came downstairs a few minutes later and found Elizabeth frantically arranging decorative objects in the living room while Sarah vacuumed with quick, efficient movements. "My sister-in-law will be here any minute," Elizabeth explained to Marcus. "She notices everything, so the house needs to be impeccable." Marcus observed the interaction between Elizabeth and Sarah during the house preparations. Elizabeth constantly gave orders, criticized small details, and treated Sarah more like a machine than a person. Sarah, in turn, accepted everything in silence, moving through the house with the efficiency of someone accustomed to meeting impossible demands. When Elizabeth's sister-in-law arrived, Marcus had the opportunity to observe Elizabeth performing her role as the perfect wife. Her transformation was impressive, from domestic tyrant to charming hostess in a matter of seconds. "Rachel, it's so good to see you," exclaimed Elizabeth, embracing her sister-in-law with theatrical affection. "Hi, Elizabeth. Wow, your house is always so beautiful," replied Rachel, an elegant woman in her 40s. "Oh, thank you. Sarah takes great care of everything," said Elizabeth, casually waving toward the maid as if she were a decorative object. Marcus noticed how Elizabeth managed to sound generous and caring when mentioning Sarah, when just minutes before she had been treating her with unnecessary harshness. During the conversation between Elizabeth and Rachel, Marcus pretended to work in the kitchen while listening to fragments of their talk. What he heard was revealing about Elizabeth's character. "How do you keep the house so organized?" asked Rachel. "Oh dear, it's all about knowing how to handle staff," Elizabeth replied with a tone of superiority. "You have to be firm from the start. If you're too soft, they slack off." "Sarah seems very efficient." "Yes, she is. But you know how it is, right? You always have to keep an eye on them. Sometimes they think they can do whatever they want." Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he heard Elizabeth speak condescendingly about Sarah, especially knowing how she treated her when there were no visitors around. The conversation continued for about an hour, during which Marcus witnessed Elizabeth being waited on by Sarah as if she were a medieval servant. Sarah brought coffee, cookies, fruit, and adjusted the sofa cushions whenever needed, all under Elizabeth's critical gaze, who took every opportunity to make small corrections in front of her sister-in-law. "Sarah, this coffee is a bit strong," said Elizabeth, tasting the drink. "Next time use less coffee grounds." "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth, should I make another one now?" "No need. But remember for next time." Marcus watched Sarah accept the criticism with resignation, even though he knew she had made the coffee exactly how Elizabeth liked it every other time. When Rachel finally left, Elizabeth's transformation was instant and frightening. As soon as the door closed, all friendliness vanished from her face. "Sarah," she shouted, "why did you take so long to bring the coffee? Rachel was waiting." Marcus knew this was a lie. Sarah had been extremely efficient, bringing the coffee in less than 5 minutes. "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth, I thought I was quick." "Quick? It was almost 10 minutes. And another thing, next time I say the coffee is strong, you ask if I want another. Don't wait for me to ask." "Yes, ma'am, sorry." Marcus was shocked by the speed of Elizabeth's transformation. It was as if she had two completely different personalities, One for the outside world and another to exert power over vulnerable people. And while you're at it, clean this table properly, Elizabeth continued. There are cup marks. If Rachel had seen, I would have been embarrassed. Marcus looked at the table and saw no marks at all. Elizabeth was creating non-existent problems just to have reasons to scold Sarah. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. What happened in the following minutes made Marcus question whether he really knew the woman he was married to. Elizabeth began finding faults in everything Sarah had done during the day, the way she folded the towels, the organization of the books on the shelf, the angle of the pictures on the wall. Nothing was good enough, and each criticism was accompanied by comments about Sarah's lack of attention and sloppiness. "Look at this, Sarah," said Elizabeth, pointing to a cushion on the sofa. "It's crooked. How did you not see that?" Marcus looked at the cushion. It was perfectly positioned. "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth. I'll fix it now." "It's not just about fixing it. It's about paying attention. Do you think I pay your salary for you to do things half-heartedly?" Sarah adjusted the cushion with trembling hands, clearly trying to hold back tears. "Is this better?" Elizabeth looked critically and sighed with impatience. "It is, but next time pay attention from the start. I shouldn't have to follow you around correcting everything." Marcus was feeling physically nauseated by what he was witnessing. Elizabeth was exercising a kind of systematic psychological torture, creating non-existent problems and humiliating Sarah for imagined flaws. "I'll need to finish the work here tomorrow," announced Marcus, trying to keep his voice steady. "The problem is more complex than I imagined." Elizabeth looked at him with irritation. "Can't you solve it today? I don't like unfinished business." "Unfortunately not, Mum. I need specific parts that I can only get tomorrow morning." "All right," sighed Elizabeth, "but I want it done tomorrow. I don't like a messy house with construction." Marcus left his own home feeling like a stranger in his own life. What he had witnessed in the last few hours had completely shaken his perception of Elizabeth and the kind of person he had chosen to build a family with. On the way to the hotel where he would spend the night, maintaining the pretense that he was traveling, Marcus couldn't get the expressions of fear and resignation on Sarah's face out of his head. How had he been so blind? How had he not realized that his wife was capable of such cruelty? But what troubled him most were the broader implications of what he had discovered. If Elizabeth treated Sarah this way, how did she behave with other vulnerable people? How was she influencing Tyler? What kind of values was she passing on to their son? That night, Marcus could barely sleep. His mind was filled with images from the day, Sarah trying to hold back tears, Elizabeth changing personalities instantly, the palpable fear in the atmosphere of the house whenever Elizabeth was present. The next morning, Marcus prepared for the second day of his investigation. He had decided that he needed to see more, to better understand Elizabeth's pattern of behavior before making any decision about what to do with this information. When he arrived at the house, he was greeted by Sarah, who seemed even more tense than the day before. "Good morning, miss," greeted Marcus. "Good morning, Mr. John," replied Sarah, but Marcus noticed her voice was hoarse, as if she had cried during the night. Elizabeth appeared a few minutes later, wearing a red silk robe that accentuated her red hair. She was visibly annoyed. "You're early," she commented to Marcus, but not as a compliment. "I want to finish the job as quickly as possible, as you requested." Elizabeth nodded briefly and turned to Sarah with a harshness that made Marcus brace for what was to come. "Sarah, why wasn't the guest room bed made yesterday? Rachel might have wanted to rest." Marcus knew that Rachel had only been in the house for an hour and a half the previous afternoon and hadn't even gone upstairs. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth. I didn't know you wanted me to tidy that room too." "How didn't you know? It's obvious that when there are guests, all rooms have to be perfect. You have no initiative." Marcus watched Sarah accept the unfair scolding in silence, but noticed her hands trembling slightly. "And another thing," continued Elizabeth, moving dangerously close to Sarah. "Last night I heard noise in the kitchen. What were you doing there?" I was preparing today's lunch, Mrs. Elizabeth. I got some things ready to save time this morning." "And who told you to work after hours?" If I wanted you to work at night, I would have said so. Marcus was confused. Elizabeth was scolding Sarah both for not taking initiative and for taking too much. I'm sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth. I just thought it would be better to have everything organized. I don't pay you to think, Elizabeth snapped. I pay you to do what I tell you when I tell you. The shout was so loud and sudden that even Marcus was startled. Sarah visibly paled and lowered her head even further. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. And stop making noise in the middle of the night. People are trying to sleep in this house. Marcus knew Elizabeth was lying. Her bedroom was on the opposite side of the kitchen, and it would be impossible to hear normal noises from there. Elizabeth was creating non-existent problems, just to have reasons to humiliate Sarah. Now go clean that room immediately, Elizabeth ordered. And next time, use your head. Sarah quickly left the room, and Marcus saw her discreetly wiping her eyes as she went up the stairs. Elizabeth turned to Marcus as if nothing had happened. Sorry about the noise. Sometimes I need to be firm with her. Marcus could barely contain his indignation, but maintained his role as John, the plumber. I understand, ma'am. It's just that if you don't set boundaries, they slack off. Then it becomes a mess. Marcus nodded silently, but inside he was boiling. The ease with which Elizabeth justified her cruelty was almost as disturbing as the cruelty itself. While pretending to work on the pipes, Marcus stayed alert to the noises coming from the upper floor. He could hear Sarah moving quickly, clearly trying to clean the room as fast as possible to avoid further scolding. About 20 minutes later, Sarah came down the stairs and approached Elizabeth, who was in the living room on her phone. It's done, Mrs. Elizabeth. The room is clean. Elizabeth didn't even look up from her phone. About time. And the laundry? Did you sort the clothes? Not yet, Mrs. Elizabeth. I'll do it now. Not yet, it's almost 9. How long do you plan to keep dawdling? Marcus looked at the clock. It was 8:45. Sarah had spent the last 20 minutes cleaning a room that didn't even need cleaning, and now she was being criticized for not being in 2 places at once. I'm sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth, I'll do it right away. And when you're done, clean Tyler's bathroom. Last night I saw it was dirty. Marcus knew this was also a lie. Tyler always kept the bathroom clean, and besides, Elizabeth rarely checked her son's bathroom. That was a task she normally delegated to Sarah. Yes, ma'am. Oh, and this afternoon, Mrs. Dorothy is coming to pick up some plants from the garden. When she arrives, you help her choose the best ones. And don't let her take the prettiest ones. Offer the ones that are starting to wilt. Marcus was shocked. Mrs. Dorothy was an elderly neighbor whom Elizabeth always praised in his presence, talking about how she was her friend. But now she was instructing Sarah to deceive the woman. Understood, Mrs. Elizabeth. And one more thing. When the plumber is done, you clean everywhere he worked. I don't want any trace of dirt. Marcus was working extremely carefully, precisely to avoid making any mess, but Elizabeth was creating more unnecessary work for Sarah. The day continued, with Elizabeth creating an endless list of tasks for Sarah, many of them unnecessary or contradicting previous instructions. Marcus watched as Sarah moved through the house like a ghost, trying to satisfy impossible demands while avoiding any confrontation. During lunch, Marcus witnessed a scene that made him completely lose faith in Elizabeth. Sarah had prepared a simple but delicious meal, serving Elizabeth first, then Tyler, and leaving a plate for herself in the kitchen. Sarah, Elizabeth called when the maid was almost finished eating, I need you to go to the market now. Now, Mrs. Elizabeth? Yes, now. I forgot to buy seasonings for tonight's dinner. If you had made a proper list yesterday, this wouldn't have happened. Marcus knew Elizabeth hadn't mentioned any special dinner, and that any forgotten groceries weren't Sarah's responsibility. But my lunch, began Sarah hesitantly. Your lunch? Repeated Elizabeth with an icy tone. Do you think your lunch is more important than the family's needs? No, of course not, Mrs. Elizabeth. I just... Then go now. You'll eat when you return. Marcus watched Sarah put her still full plate in the refrigerator and get ready to leave. When she passed him in the kitchen, he saw tears of frustration in her eyes. Excuse me, she murmured to Marcus. Of course, he replied, wishing he could do something to help her. After Sarah left, Marcus heard Elizabeth talking on the phone with a friend, laughing about how sometimes you need to remind the maid what the priorities are. The coldness and pleasure Elizabeth showed in exerting power over a vulnerable person made Marcus nauseated. When Sarah returned from the market an hour and a half later, her lunch was past the point of being properly reheated. Marcus saw her quickly eating a plate of cold, wilted food in the kitchen, clearly hungry, but without time to prepare something new. "You took too long at the market," commented Elizabeth when Sarah was putting away the groceries. "Sorry, Mrs. Elizabeth, there was a line at the butcher shop." "A line? Why didn't you go to another butcher shop? I thought you wanted me to buy from the usual bakery." "I didn't think anything. I want you to use common sense." Again, Elizabeth was criticizing Sarah for following exactly the instructions she had given earlier. During the afternoon, Marcus witnessed several other scenes of systematic humiliation. Elizabeth criticized how Sarah folded towels, even though they were perfectly folded, scolded her for using the wrong cleaning products, the same products she had been using for months without problems, and forced her to clean surfaces that were already spotless again. What disturbed Marcus the most was realizing that Elizabeth was clearly enjoying the power she held over Sarah. There was a gleam in her eyes whenever she managed to make Sarah apologize or humiliate herself. It was as if Sarah's submission and suffering were a source of pleasure for Elizabeth. Around 3 in the afternoon, Marcus decided he needed to do something to ease the situation, even if it was a small gesture. "Mrs. Elizabeth," he said, approaching the living room where she was watching television, "I'll need the kitchen to be free for about an hour. I need to check the plumbing that runs behind the cabinets." It was a lie, but he wanted to give Sarah a break from the endless tasks. "A whole hour?" asked Elizabeth irritably. "Unfortunately, yes. It's the most complicated part of the job." Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "Fine. Sarah, leave the kitchen free for the plumber and take the opportunity to clean the bedrooms again." "But Mrs. Elizabeth, I cleaned the bedrooms this morning." "So what? A clean house is a well-kept house. Go." Marcus watched Sarah accept another unnecessary task, but at least she would be away from Elizabeth's oppressive presence for a while. Alone in the kitchen, Marcus tried to process everything he had witnessed over the past 2 days. The woman he was married to was a completely different person than he had imagined. Elizabeth wasn't just a bit demanding, she was deliberately cruel, exerting psychological power over a person who depended on that job to survive. But what worried him most was the effect this was having on their son. Tyler was being raised in an environment where cruelty against vulnerable people was normalized. What kind of adult would he become if he continued to be exposed to these examples? Marcus was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't notice Tyler entering the kitchen. "Hi, Uncle John," said the boy with the natural familiarity of children. "Hi, Tyler. How was school today?" "It was cool, but I get sad when I come home." Tyler's unexpected answer made Marcus stop what he was doing. "Why do you get sad?" Tyler hesitated, as if deciding whether he could trust this stranger. "It's just, Mom gets mad at Sarah almost every day. And I like Sarah. She's nice to me." "What do you mean your mom gets mad?" "She yells, says Sarah did everything wrong even when she didn't. Sometimes I see Sarah crying in the kitchen when she thinks nobody's watching." Marcus felt his heart tighten hearing his son describe the domestic situation with painful clarity. "And how do you feel when that happens?" "Bad," admitted Tyler. "Once I tried to tell Mom that Sarah hadn't done anything wrong, but she got really mad at me too, said I shouldn't interfere in adult matters." Marcus discreetly hugged his son, feeling a mix of pride for the boy's natural empathy and concern for the environment he was growing up in. "You're a good boy, Tyler. It's important to care when someone is being treated badly." "Really?" asked Tyler, as if this were a new idea to him. "But Mom said housekeepers have to be treated with a firm hand." "What do you think about that?" Tyler thought for a moment. "I think everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. Sarah is always kind to me, so why can't she receive kindness too?" Tyler's innocent wisdom deeply touched Marcus. Despite being exposed to Elizabeth's bad examples, the boy kept his moral compass intact. "You're right, Tyler. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. Then why doesn't Mum treat Sarah that way? It was a question Marcus had no answer for. How to explain to a 10-year-old that his mother was capable of deliberate cruelty toward vulnerable people? Sometimes people forget to be kind, he said finally. When Dad is home, Mom is kinder to Sarah, observed Tyler. Does she remember to be kinder when he's here? Tyler's sharp observation confirmed Marcus's suspicions about Elizabeth's behavior pattern. She modified her behavior in his presence, keeping her true nature hidden. Tyler, said Marcus, choosing his words carefully, what would you do if you could change how your mom treats Sarah? I'd tell her to stop being mean, Tyler replied immediately, and I'd tell her that Sarah is a good person and deserves to be treated with kindness. And if she didn't listen, Tyler became thoughtful for a moment. Then I'd tell Dad. He always knows what to do when things are wrong. Marcus felt a wave of emotion realizing his son trusted him to resolve unfair situations. But he also felt the weight of responsibility to live up to that trust. Is your dad coming back from his trip soon? Asked Marcus, maintaining the role. I think so. He's never away for long. I miss him. I'm sure he misses you too. At that moment, Elizabeth entered the kitchen, and Marcus immediately saw the change in Tyler's posture. The boy straightened up and became more cautious, as if his mother's presence required constant vigilance. Tyler, what are you doing here? Asked Elizabeth. You're not supposed to be bothering the gentleman's work. He wasn't bothering me, said Marcus quickly. We were just talking. Elizabeth looked suspiciously at the two. Tyler, go do your homework. And you, she said to Marcus, do you really need to take up the whole kitchen? I have things to do here. I'm almost done with this part, lied Marcus. Just another 15 minutes. Elizabeth left the kitchen, taking Tyler with her, but not before Marcus saw the knowing look the boy gave him, as if they shared a secret understanding about the injustice they witnessed daily in the house. When Sarah returned to the kitchen an hour later, Marcus noticed she looked even more exhausted. There was a defeated expression on her face that hadn't been there in the morning. How was the room cleaning? He asked casually. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude for showing interest in her work. It was fine, she replied hesitantly. There's always something to fix up. Marcus realized Sarah had developed a pattern of diplomatic responses that didn't reveal her true feelings. It was a form of self-preservation in a hostile environment. You look tired, he observed. A little, but it's normal. Normal? Sarah hesitated, as if deciding how much she could reveal. Well, some days are more intense than others, and today was an intense day. Sarah nodded slightly, and Marcus saw tears forming in her eyes. Can I ask you something? He said quietly. Do you have any family? Someone you can talk to about things? I have my sister, answered Sarah, but I don't like to worry her with my problems. She already has her own difficulties. And friends. Sarah made a sad expression. I don't have much time for friendships, and besides, it's hard to explain to people what it's like working here. They wouldn't understand. What do you mean they wouldn't understand? Well, from the outside, it looks like I'm lucky. Beautiful house, wealthy family, regular paycheck. People would think I'm complaining when I'm well off. Marcus understood Sarah's dilemma. She was trapped in an abusive situation that was invisible to the outside world. Elizabeth maintained appearances so well that nobody would believe the truth about her behavior. But you're not happy, said Marcus, not as a question but as a statement. Sarah looked directly into his eyes for the first time, and Marcus saw all the pain and frustration she had been hiding. No, she admitted in a whisper. I'm not. Why don't you look for another job? I've tried, said Sarah with tears rolling down her face. But it's difficult. Families want references and, well, if I leave here on bad terms, Mrs. Elizabeth might speak poorly of me to other people. It's a small circle, everyone knows each other. Marcus realized Elizabeth wasn't just psychologically abusing Sarah, but also keeping her trapped through control over her professional reputation. And even if I found another job, continued Sarah, I'd probably earn less. I can't afford to earn less, not with my sister depending on me. Your sister can't work at all. She has physical limitations, but mainly she's afraid. She spent her entire childhood being protected, never developed the confidence to face the outside world. I'm all she has." Marcus felt a deep admiration for Sarah. She was sacrificing her own happiness and dignity to care for a vulnerable sister. "Have you thought about talking to your employer about the situation?" suggested Marcus, curious to know how Sarah perceived her relationship with him. "Dr. Marcus," Sarah seemed to consider the idea for a moment. "He seems like a good person, but men like that don't get involved with domestic problems, and besides, he's married to Mrs. Elizabeth. Even if he wanted to help, it would be complicated." Sarah's response revealed as much about her perception of the situation as about the limitations she felt in seeking support. "But if he knew how you're treated, he wouldn't know. Mrs. Elizabeth is very careful. When he's home, everything is different. She becomes more controlled." "More controlled how?" "Well, she's still demanding, but she doesn't yell as much. She doesn't make those impossible demands. It's like she's playing a different role when he's around." Marcus was shocked to realize how consciously Elizabeth was manipulating the situation to hide her abusive behavior. "So he never sees how she really is?" "No. And even if he did, he'd probably think it was just a moment of stress or something. Husbands tend to believe their wives, right?" Sarah's observation about the marital dynamic made Marcus wonder how many other things Elizabeth had been hiding from him, and for how long she had been playing a role in his presence. At that moment, Elizabeth entered the kitchen, and the immediate transformation in Sarah's posture was painful to witness. "Sarah, why are you here talking again?" Elizabeth asked irritably. "Haven't you finished what I told you to do?" "Yes, Mrs. Elizabeth. I was just asking Mr. Marcus if he needed anything." "He doesn't need anything except space to work. Go fold the laundry." "But I already folded it this morning." "Are you questioning what I'm saying?" Elizabeth's tone became dangerously quiet. "No, Mrs. Elizabeth, sorry, I'll do it now." Marcus watched Sarah quickly leave the kitchen, once again accepting an unnecessary task to avoid confrontation. "I apologize for her behavior," Elizabeth said to Marcus, as if Sarah were a misbehaving child. "Sometimes she forgets her place." The phrase made Marcus's blood boil. Elizabeth was talking about Sarah as if she were an object that needed to be kept in its proper place. "She just seemed to be trying to be helpful," Marcus said, testing how far he could defend Sarah without raising suspicions. Elizabeth looked at him with surprise, as if she didn't expect a plumber to have opinions about the treatment of domestic staff. "You don't know her like I do," Elizabeth replied. "If you give her an inch, she takes a mile. Housekeepers are like that. You have to maintain firm control or they slack off." The naturalness with which Elizabeth expressed her prejudiced and dehumanizing views about domestic workers shocked Marcus. She truly believed she had the right to treat Sarah as less than human. "I see," Marcus said, though inside he was feeling increasingly nauseated. Elizabeth stayed in the kitchen for a few more minutes, clearly supervising Marcus's work, but he noticed she was also watching his reactions, as if assessing whether he approved or disapproved of her way of treating staff. "Do you have a housekeeper at home?" Elizabeth asked casually. "No, Mum. My wife takes care of everything." "Oh, how lucky. I always wanted to be like that, but with a house this size it's impossible, and these days it's hard to find good help. Most of them have no upbringing, don't know how to behave." Marcus realized Elizabeth was testing his opinions about social class and treatment of employees. She wanted validation for her behaviors, wanted to find someone who agreed with her views about social superiority. "Every family has their own way of organizing things," he replied diplomatically. Elizabeth seemed slightly disappointed with his neutral response. "That's true. But the important thing is to maintain discipline. If you're not firm from the start, they'll walk all over you." Marcus nodded vaguely, but inside he was planning how he would confront Elizabeth about this whole situation when he finally revealed his identity. By the end of the second day of investigation, Marcus was emotionally drained. What he had witnessed was far worse than anything he could have imagined. Elizabeth wasn't just a demanding employer, she was someone who took pleasure in exerting power over a vulnerable person. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. That night, Marcus made a decision. He needed to confront Elizabeth, but first wanted one last chance to observe her behavior, this time in a situation where she felt completely free to be herself. The next morning, Marcus called Elizabeth pretending to be from the plumbing company. "Mrs. Elizabeth, this is David from Thompson Plumbing. John asked me to call and let you know he'll be late today. There was an emergency situation and he won't arrive until around noon." "How inconvenient," Elizabeth complained. "Well, there's no other way, but I want him to finish today, understand? I can't stand this mess anymore." "Don't worry, Mum. He'll finish today for sure." Marcus hung up, satisfied. Now he would arrive at the house at noon, when Elizabeth would be behaving naturally without a stranger present to moderate her actions. At 11:30, Marcus parked his car on the street and walked toward the house. Before even ringing the doorbell, he could hear shouting coming from inside the mansion. "And you think I'll accept this kind of carelessness?" came Elizabeth's voice, loud and furious. Marcus rang the doorbell, and the shouting stopped immediately. A few minutes later, Sarah opened the door, and Marcus was shocked by what he saw. Her eyes were red from crying. There was a scratch on her left arm, and she was visibly trembling. "Mrs. Elizabeth?" Marcus called out loudly. "It's John from the plumbing company." Elizabeth appeared at the door, quickly trying to compose herself, but Marcus could see the poorly disguised irritation on her face. "You're late," she said accusingly. "Sorry, ma'am. I had an emergency to take care of." "Well, come in already. I want you to finish today." Marcus entered the house and immediately noticed signs that something serious had happened. There were broken plate pieces on the living room floor, and Sarah was trying to pick them up with trembling hands. "So what happened here?" asked Marcus. "Sarah was clumsy and broke a plate," Elizabeth replied coldly. "Now she's cleaning up the mess she made." Marcus watched Sarah gathering the broken pieces and saw that there was blood on her fingers. She had cut herself, but continued cleaning silently. "She's hurt," Marcus observed. "They're just little scratches," Elizabeth said indifferently. "She should be more careful next time." Elizabeth's complete lack of empathy for Sarah's physical pain was the last straw for Marcus. He could no longer maintain the pretense of being just a plumber. "Sarah, you should wash those cuts," Marcus said, approaching her. "No need to worry about her," Elizabeth said. "She can manage." "But she's bleeding," Marcus insisted. "So what?" Elizabeth looked at him irritably. "She's an adult. She knows how to take care of herself." Marcus watched Elizabeth look at Sarah as if she were a broken object that needed fixing, not a person who was in pain. "Actually, I think it would be better for her to go to a medical clinic," said Marcus. "These cuts could get infected." "Medical clinic?" Elizabeth laughed sarcastically. "For some little scratches, you're exaggerating." "Mrs. Elizabeth," Sarah said quietly, "can I just wash them at the kitchen sink?" "Fine, but be quick. You still have to finish cleaning the living room." Marcus accompanied Sarah to the kitchen, and when they were alone, he asked quietly, "How did you get hurt? Was it just from the plate?" Sarah hesitated before answering, looking nervously toward the door. "I tripped when she yelled at me," she whispered, "and I ended up dropping the plate. And then when I went to quickly pick up the pieces, I cut myself." Why was she screaming? Sarah began to cry silently. "Because I forgot to buy something at the market yesterday, something she had never asked for, but said it was obvious I should have bought. Then she got furious and said, 'I'm not even good enough to do the shopping right.'" Marcus felt anger growing inside him. Elizabeth had humiliated Sarah until she was shaken enough to trip and hurt herself, and then blamed her for the accident. "And how did you hurt your arm?" he asked, noticing the scratch he had seen when Sarah opened the door. Sarah hesitated even more. "It was when I tripped. I scraped it on the corner of the table." Marcus suspected there was more to the story, but didn't want to force Sarah to recount details that clearly made her uncomfortable. "Sarah," he said softly, "you don't deserve to be treated like this. No one does." Sarah looked at him in surprise, as if she didn't expect compassion from a stranger. It's my job," she finally said. I have to endure it. No, you don't. There are other jobs, other families. You don't understand, Sarah interrupted. I can't just leave. I have responsibilities, people depending on me. And besides, who would believe me if I told them how I'm treated here? Mrs. Elizabeth is respected. She has important friends. I'm just a maid. Marcus realized that Sarah had internalized the sense of powerlessness that Elizabeth cultivated in her. She truly believed she had no choices or rights. What if someone important knew the truth? Asked Marcus. If someone who could do something knew how you're treated? Like who? Like her husband. If he knew what kind of person she really is? Sarah shook her head sadly. He would never believe it. Men like him don't believe women like her can be cruel. And even if he did, he wouldn't go against his own wife because of a maid. Sarah's answer revealed not only her perception of her own situation, but also her beliefs about how rich people view domestic workers. Are you so sure? I am. I've worked in other houses before. The bosses always side with their wives. It's easier to replace a maid than to deal with marital problems. Marcus felt a pang of pain realizing how Sarah saw him, as someone who would automatically prioritize marital loyalty over basic justice. At that moment, Elizabeth entered the kitchen, clearly annoyed to find them talking again. Sarah, how many times do I have to tell you not to chit-chat? She yelled. Go finish cleaning that room. Yes, Mrs. Elizabeth. Sorry. Sarah quickly left the kitchen, leaving Marcus alone with Elizabeth. That maid just doesn't learn, commented Elizabeth. She always finds excuses not to work. She was just tending to her injuries, said Marcus. Injuries? Elizabeth laughed. Just a few little scratches. She's exaggerating to get attention. Marcus could no longer contain himself. Mrs. Elizabeth, may I ask you a personal question? What kind of question? Have you ever worked as a domestic maid? The question caught Elizabeth completely off guard. Of course not, she replied indignantly. Why are you asking that? Just curiosity, said Marcus. It's just that you seem to know a lot about how maids think and act. Elizabeth looked at him suspiciously, as if trying to understand what he was implying. It's experience, she finally said. I've had many maids over the years. You learn how to handle them. And were they all problematic like Sarah? Most of them. It's in their nature. If you're too soft, they take advantage. That's why you have to be firm from the start. Marcus nodded as if in agreement, but inside he was horrified by Elizabeth's views on domestic workers. And your husband? Does he agree with your methods? The question made Elizabeth hesitate. My husband is very gentle, sometimes too gentle. He doesn't understand that firmness is necessary to maintain order in the house. So he doesn't know how you treat Sarah? Elizabeth looked at Marcus with a strange expression. Why all these questions? Are you a plumber or a reporter? Marcus realized he had gone too far. Elizabeth was beginning to suspect there was something odd about his questions. Sorry, ma'am. It's just that I work in many homes and I always get curious about how different families handle their staff. Well, every family has their methods, said Elizabeth, but she still watched him with suspicion. The rest of the morning passed in tension. Elizabeth became more vigilant, observing both Marcus and Sarah with doubled attention. Marcus realized he had lost his chance to observe her natural behavior. Around 2 in the afternoon, Marcus decided he had seen enough. He had more than enough evidence about Elizabeth's true character, and prolonging the charade would only increase the risk of being discovered. Mrs. Elizabeth, he announced, I've finished the job. The plumbing is working perfectly now. About time, replied Elizabeth. How much is it? Marcus gave a fair price for the imaginary service, which Elizabeth paid without blinking, eager to be rid of him. Sarah, shouted Elizabeth, come clean where the plumber worked. Sarah appeared immediately, carrying cleaning supplies, still with makeshift bandages on her cut fingers. It was a pleasure to meet you, miss, said Marcus to Sarah, trying to convey some message of support through his eyes. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. Marcus left his own house for the last time as John, the plumber. Now he needed to decide how he would confront Elizabeth with everything he had discovered. On the way to the hotel, Marcus reflected on the 3 days of investigation. What he had witnessed was far beyond simple bad temper or excessive demands. Elizabeth had revealed a systematic pattern of psychological abuse, exercising power over a vulnerable person in a deliberate and calculated way. But what disturbed Marcus most was the discovery that he had married a person completely different from what he imagined. The caring and compassionate woman he knew was just a carefully constructed facade. The real Elizabeth was cold, cruel, and devoid of basic empathy. That night, Marcus made his final decision. He would confront Elizabeth, but not just about her treatment of Sarah. He would question the entire foundation of their marriage, all the trust he had placed in a person he now realized was capable of cruelties he had never imagined. The next morning, Marcus returned home from his trip, prepared for one of the most difficult conversations of his life. When he arrived, he found Elizabeth in the living room, dressed up and smiling, perfectly playing the role of the loving wife. "Darling," she exclaimed, hugging him with theatrical affection, "I'm so glad you're back. I missed you so much." Marcus returned the hug, but his heart was heavy with the knowledge of who she really was. "How were things here?" he asked, testing whether she would mention the plumbing problems. "Quiet. Oh, some plumbers came to fix the little issues you had asked about. They've already finished everything." The casual mention of little issues didn't come close to reflecting the drama and suffering Marcus had witnessed over the past 3 days. "And how was it with Sarah? Did she behave well?" "Sarah?" Elizabeth shrugged. "Normal. You know how she is. Always needs a little push to do things right." Marcus watched Elizabeth completely minimize and distort the reality of the past few days. It was as if she truly believed her cruel behavior was just effective management of staff. "Can I speak with her?" asked Marcus. "I want to thank her for taking good care of the house while I was away." "Of course! Sarah!" shouted Elizabeth. Sarah appeared a few minutes later, and Marcus was shocked by her appearance. She seemed to have lost weight over the past 3 days, had deep bags under her eyes, and she avoided eye contact with both of them. "Hi, Sarah," said Marcus gently. "Thank you for taking good care of everything while I was traveling." "You're welcome, Dr. Marcus," Sarah replied softly. "Are you okay? You look tired." Marcus saw Sarah glance quickly at Elizabeth before answering. "I'm fine, sir. Just a little under the weather." Elizabeth smiled approvingly at Sarah's diplomatic response, clearly pleased that she hadn't mentioned anything about the events of the past few days. "Well, if you're not feeling well, you should get some rest," said Marcus. "She's fine," Elizabeth interrupted quickly. "It's nothing a little vitamin C won't fix." Marcus observed the dynamic between the two women, clearly seeing how Elizabeth controlled even the conversations Sarah could have. "Sarah, could you leave us alone for a moment?" asked Marcus. "Of course, Doctor, excuse me." After Sarah left, Marcus turned to Elizabeth, preparing for the confrontation that would change their lives forever. "Elizabeth, I need to talk seriously with you about some things." "About what?" she asked, still smiling, but Marcus detected growing tension in her eyes. "About how you treat the people who work in our house." The change in Elizabeth's expression was instantaneous. The smile completely disappeared, replaced by a defensive look. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the way you treat Sarah when I'm not present." Elizabeth laughed nervously. "Marcus, you're being ridiculous. I treat Sarah very well. She gets paid on time, has a place to live, food, and daily humiliation, constant yelling and impossible tasks to complete." The specific accusation made Elizabeth pale. "Who told you that? Was it Sarah? She lied to you." "No one told me anything, Elizabeth. I saw it with my own eyes." "How did you see? You were traveling." Marcus took a deep breath, preparing for the revelation that would forever destroy the facade of their marriage. "No, Elizabeth, I wasn't traveling. I've been here for the past 3 days, disguised as John, the plumber who's been working in our house." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus saw all the emotions pass over Elizabeth's face: shock, confusion, anger, and finally, pure, primitive fury. You did what? She whispered. I disguised myself as a plumber because I received anonymous calls warning me about how you treated the staff. I needed to find out the truth. You spied on me, shouted Elizabeth. In my own house, how could you do that? How could I do that? Marcus exploded. Elizabeth, I saw you systematically humiliating a woman who depends on this job to survive. I saw you creating non-existent problems just to have reasons to yell at her. I saw you making this woman cry for fun. Fun? Elizabeth tried to sound indignant. I was maintaining discipline. Someone has to keep order in this house. Discipline? Marcus was incredulous. Elizabeth, you forced her to clean the floor with her bare hands. You yelled at her for breaking a $2 glass. You made her work without lunch. She needs to learn what? To accept abuse, to be humiliated. Elizabeth, what I saw wasn't discipline. It was pure and simple cruelty. Elizabeth tried a different approach, softening her voice. Marcus, honey, you don't understand how difficult it is to manage household staff. They take advantage if you're not firm. No, Marcus interrupted. Don't try to manipulate me now. I heard you on the phone bragging about making Sarah cry. I heard you laughing about how you put employees in their place. This isn't management. It's sadism. Elizabeth's facade finally crumbled completely. Her expression hardened, revealing the cold person Marcus had discovered over the past few days. So what if it is? She said with a chill that made Marcus shiver. She's just a maid. I pay her salary, she does what I tell her. She's a person, Elizabeth, a person with feelings, with dignity, with rights. Rights? Elizabeth laughed sarcastically. What rights? She works for me. She owes me respect and obedience. She owes you professional respect, not total submission. Elizabeth, you don't own her. Don't I? The question came loaded with an arrogance Marcus had never seen before. I pay for her food, her housing, her clothes. She exists in this house to serve me. If she doesn't like it, she can leave. Marcus was shocked by the absolute coldness in Elizabeth's voice. Do you really believe that? Do you really think money gives you the right to treat another person as less than human? I think every person has their place in society. Her place is to serve me. My place is to command. That's how the world works. No, Elizabeth, that's not how the world should work, and it's definitely not how our house will work. Our house? Elizabeth laughed bitterly. This is my house, Marcus. I'm in charge here. If you don't like my methods, that's your problem. No, Elizabeth, this is our home, and I won't allow you to keep abusing vulnerable people under my roof. Won't allow? Elizabeth stepped closer to Marcus with a threatening expression. And what exactly do you plan to do? Divorce me because I'm a demanding employer? If necessary, yes. Marcus's response made Elizabeth stop abruptly. You wouldn't do that. Elizabeth, over the past 3 days I've discovered I married someone I don't know. The woman I knew was compassionate, kind, concerned about others' well-being. The real woman is cruel, manipulative, and lacking basic empathy. I'm the same person, protested Elizabeth. Just because I maintain discipline with staff doesn't mean... It's not just that, Elizabeth, Marcus exploded. I saw you lying to our son about why you were shouting. I heard you instructing Sarah to deceive our elderly neighbor. I saw you violating the staff's privacy with hidden cameras. You're systematically dishonest and cruel. Elizabeth remained silent for a long moment, processing the accusations. When she finally spoke, her voice was icy. You want to know the truth, Marcus? The truth is you're naive. You live in a fantasy where everyone is equal, where everyone deserves the same treatment. But the real world doesn't work that way. The real world has hierarchies, yes, but that doesn't justify cruelty. Cruelty? I give that woman a job. She has a better life with me than she would anywhere else. You give employment, yes, but along with the job you give humiliation, fear, and psychological abuse. That's not generosity, Elizabeth, it's exploitation. Exploitation? Elizabeth shouted. I pay a fair wage, provide housing, food, benefits. If that's exploitation, then every family that employs domestic help is exploitative. No, Elizabeth. Other families treat their maids with respect and dignity. You treat Sarah like an object that exists for your sadistic pleasure. Sadistic pleasure? Elizabeth was growing increasingly furious. "Marcus, you're exaggerating. I just maintain order and discipline. Elizabeth, I saw you smiling when she cried. I saw the satisfaction in your eyes when she humbled herself, apologizing for things she hadn't done. That's not discipline. It's pleasure derived from someone else's suffering." The accusation hit Elizabeth like a punch. She remained silent for several minutes, clearly struggling internally. "So what if it is?" she finally said, in a frighteningly low voice. "What if I truly enjoy showing her what her place is? What's wrong with that?" Marcus was shocked by the admission. Elizabeth had finally removed all masks and revealed her true nature. "The problem, Elizabeth, is that this makes you a monster." "A monster?" Elizabeth laughed. "Marcus, open your eyes. Half the wealthy women in the United States treat their maids the same way. The difference is I'm honest about it. That doesn't justify anything. And even if it were true, I wouldn't marry half the wealthy women in the United States. I married you because I thought you were different." "Well, now you know who I really am," Elizabeth said with absolute coldness. "The question is, what will you do with this information?" Marcus looked at the woman who had been his wife for 10 years and realized she was a complete stranger to him. "First, you will apologize to Sarah for all the abuse you've inflicted on her." Elizabeth laughed sarcastically. "I won't apologize to a maid." "Then we have a very serious problem, Elizabeth." "No, Marcus, you're the one with a problem. You can try to blackmail me with divorce, but remember, half of everything you own is mine, including this house. If you want war, I can give you war." Elizabeth's threat revealed another aspect of her personality. She was willing to use any weapon available to maintain her power. "This isn't about money, Elizabeth. This is about right and wrong. This is about the kind of people we are." "The kind of people we are?" Elizabeth moved closer to Marcus again. "I'm someone born into a wealthy family who learned how to maintain that wealth. You're a businessman who got rich exploiting construction workers. Neither of us is a saint, Marcus." "I pay fair wages and treat my employees with respect," protested Marcus. "You treat well those you see daily. But what about the construction workers who work 12-hour days at your sites? Those working in dangerous conditions? Do you really think they're all treated well?" Marcus was shaken by the accusation. It was true he didn't personally supervise all his construction sites, and that some of his managers might be mistreating workers. "Even if that's true, it doesn't justify how you treat Sarah." "Of course it doesn't justify it," Elizabeth agreed, "but it shows you're not morally superior to me. We both benefit from a system that exploits poorer people. The difference is I'm honest about it. The difference, Elizabeth, is that I can change my working methods. I can implement better conditions for my employees, increase wages, improve safety. You, on the other hand, derive personal pleasure from one specific person's suffering." "Derive pleasure?" Elizabeth tried to deny again. "Elizabeth, stop pretending. You already admitted you enjoy showing her her place to Sarah. That's pure and simple sadism." Elizabeth fell silent again, but Marcus could see she was formulating a new line of attack. "Marcus, do you want to know why I treat Sarah this way?" she finally said. "Please, explain it to me." "Because she reminds me of everything I hate about myself." The unexpected answer caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "My family always had money, but my mother came from a poor family. She worked as a housemaid before marrying my father. And throughout my entire childhood, she constantly reminded me of where she came from, how she was treated, how rich people can be cruel." Marcus began to understand the complex psychology behind Elizabeth's behavior. "So you treat Sarah badly to... what? Prove that you're not like your mother?" "To prove that I deserve to be where I am," Elizabeth exploded. "To prove that I'm not some maid who got lucky marrying well. To prove that I actually belong in this world." "Elizabeth, that's deeply disturbed." "Oh, really?" Elizabeth laughed bitterly. "Marcus, you have no idea what it's like growing up being constantly reminded that you don't belong in your own lifestyle. My mother never let me forget that half my blood comes from poverty." "But that doesn't justify torturing an innocent woman." "It's not torture, it's a way to convince myself that I deserve to be at the top of the hierarchy." Marcus was horrified by the revelation. Elizabeth was abusing Sarah as a sick form of personal therapy. "Elizabeth, You need professional help. What you're describing isn't normal. Normal? Elizabeth laughed hysterically. Marcus, nothing in our life is normal. We have more money than most people can dream of. We live in a mansion. We have people who exist just to serve us. And you want to talk about normalcy? Having money doesn't give us the right to be cruel to those who have less. It doesn't give us the right, but it gives us the power. And power without consequences is practically the same as a right. Elizabeth's philosophy was shocking Marcus more and more. She truly believed wealth justified any behavior. Elizabeth, listen to what you're saying. You're justifying abuse because you have money. That's not just wrong, it's monstrous. Monstrous? Elizabeth approached Marcus again. Marcus, open your eyes. The whole world works this way. The rich abuse the poor, the powerful abuse the weak. Bosses abuse employees. I'm just being honest about it. Even if it's true that this happens on a large scale, it doesn't mean it's right. And it definitely doesn't mean I'll allow it to happen in my house. Your house? Elizabeth exploded. This house is mine too, and if I want to treat my maid however I want, I will treat her that way. No, Elizabeth, you won't, because from now on things are going to change drastically in this house. Oh, really? And how exactly do you plan to stop me? Marcus took a deep breath, preparing for the declaration that would change everything. If you don't apologize to Sarah and completely change your behavior, I will file for divorce. And during the divorce proceedings, I will testify about everything I've witnessed over the past 3 days. The threat made Elizabeth pale. You wouldn't do that. Elizabeth, I've documented everything. I have photos of Sarah's injuries, audio recordings of your phone conversations, bragging about the abuse, and witnesses who can confirm your behavior. What witnesses? Asked Elizabeth, clearly panicked. Tyler himself. Our 10-year-old son has already noticed that you abuse Sarah. He told me, thinking I was a strange plumber, about how you yell at her unfairly. You would use our son against me? I would use the truth. Elizabeth, even a 10-year-old child can see that your behavior is wrong. How can't you? Elizabeth remained silent for a long moment, clearly processing the implications of what Marcus had said. And what exactly do you want from me? She asked finally. First, you will sincerely apologize to Sarah for all the abuse. Second, you will double her salary as compensation for the mistreatment. Third, you will start therapy to deal with your psychological issues. And fourth, you will never again treat any employee of this house with disrespect. And if I don't accept these conditions, then you can prepare for a very public and humiliating divorce, and you can also prepare to explain to Tyler why Daddy doesn't live here anymore. The mention of Tyler touched something deep in Elizabeth. Marcus saw her defenses beginning to crumble. Marcus, I can't, she said with tears in her eyes for the first time in the conversation. Can't what? I can't apologize to her. It's stronger than me. When I see her, I see everything I'm afraid of being. I see my mother cleaning other people's houses, being humiliated, being treated as less than human. Marcus began to understand the depth of Elizabeth's psychological problems. Elizabeth, Sarah is not your mother, and you are not the people who humiliated your mother. You can break this cycle. I don't know how, admitted Elizabeth, crying openly now. I spent so much time building walls to protect myself that now I don't know how to tear them down. The first step is to recognize that you caused pain to an innocent person. The second step is to take responsibility for that pain. And if I try to apologize and can't sound sincere, what if she doesn't forgive me? Elizabeth, you can't control whether she will forgive you. You can only control your own actions from now on. Elizabeth remained silent for several minutes, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Marcus, she said finally, I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if I admit I was wrong, if I apologize, I'll discover that I'm truly a terrible person. Afraid that you'll leave me anyway. Afraid that our son will hate me when he understands what I did. Marcus felt a pang of compassion for the first time since he had discovered Elizabeth's true nature. Elizabeth, being able to recognize when we're wrong doesn't make us terrible people. It makes us human. And having the courage to change makes us admirable people. But what if I can't change? What if I try to be a better person and fail? Then you try again and again, until you succeed. There's no magic formula, Elizabeth. Real change requires constant effort. Elizabeth fell silent again, and Marcus could see she was having an intense internal struggle. If I do everything you asked, can you promise me you won't leave me? Elizabeth, I can't promise that our marriage will survive this. Too much damage has been done. Too much trust has been broken. But I can promise that if you show real and consistent change, I will try to rebuild our relationship. And Tyler, will you tell him about all this? That will depend on how you behave from now on. If you really change, maybe he'll never need to know the details. But if you continue with the same patterns, yes, he will need to understand why our family is falling apart. Elizabeth nodded slowly, still with tears in her eyes. Marcus, I want to try. I really want to try to be a better person, but I'm going to need help. What kind of help? Therapy, like you suggested, and I'm going to need your patience. I know I don't deserve it, but Elizabeth, everyone deserves the chance to change. But change has to be demonstrated through actions, not just words. I understand. When do you want me to talk to Sarah? Now. The longer you wait, the harder it will get. Elizabeth dried her eyes and took several deep breaths. Can you be present when I apologize? I think I'm going to need moral support. Of course. But Elizabeth, it has to be a real apology. No justifications, no minimizing what you did. You have to completely acknowledge the pain you caused. I understand. Marcus went to call Sarah, who appeared a few minutes later, visibly nervous at the presence of both. Sarah, said Marcus gently, Elizabeth has something important to tell you. Elizabeth looked at Sarah, and Marcus could see she was struggling against all her instincts of superiority and control. Sarah, began Elizabeth, her voice trembling, I need to apologize to you. Sarah looked confused between Elizabeth and Marcus, clearly not understanding what was happening. Apologize to me, Mrs. Elizabeth. No, Sarah, it's I who need to apologize to you for my behavior, for the last 2 years, for the way I treated you. Sarah remained silent, clearly shocked. I know I was cruel to you, continued Elizabeth with evident difficulty. I yelled for no reason, created problems that didn't exist, humiliated you, and worst of all, I knew I was being cruel. I knew I was causing pain, and I kept doing it anyway. Marcus watched tears forming in Sarah's eyes. I have no excuse for my behavior, said Elizabeth. It wasn't about you doing anything wrong. It was about my own issues, my own insecurities. But that doesn't justify anything I did. Mrs. Elizabeth began Sarah, but Elizabeth interrupted her. Please, let me finish. Sarah, you are an exemplary employee. You take care of our home and our son with love and dedication. You deserved respect and gratitude, and instead I gave you humiliation and cruelty. Marcus saw that both Elizabeth and Sarah were crying now. I don't know if you can forgive me, continued Elizabeth, and I understand if you can't. But I want you to know that I will change. I will seek professional help, and I will learn to be a better person. And in the meantime, said Marcus, your salary will be doubled as a small compensation for the mistreatment you suffered. Sarah looked shocked at Marcus. Doubled? But I don't understand what's happening. What's happening, said Elizabeth, is that someone finally forced me to face the truth about who I've become, and the truth is that I've become a cruel and abusive person. But, Mrs. Elizabeth... Sarah, answer me one question honestly, said Elizabeth. Are you afraid of me? Sarah hesitated for a long moment before nodding silently. I knew it, said Elizabeth, and an employee should never be afraid of their employer. There should be respect, but not fear. I don't know what to say, admitted Sarah. You don't need to say anything right now, said Marcus. You can think about all this, and if you decide you don't want to work here anymore, we will completely understand. But if you want to stay, added Elizabeth, I promise things will be different. I promise I will treat you with the respect and dignity you've always deserved. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked directly at Elizabeth for the first time in years. "Mrs. Elizabeth, I want to believe things can be different, but it will be hard to forget." "I don't expect you to forget," said Elizabeth. "I hope you'll give me the chance to show that I can be better." "And if I stay, will things really be different?" "Sarah," said Marcus, "if things don't change, if my wife mistreats you in any way again, you come directly to talk to me, and I guarantee there will be serious consequences." "I understand," said Sarah, still processing everything that had happened. "Sarah," said Elizabeth, "I know it's a lot to ask, but do you think you could ever forgive me?" Sarah thought for a long moment before answering. "Mrs. Elizabeth, I want to forgive. Holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you, but true forgiveness will take time, and it will need to see real change." "I understand," said Elizabeth, "and I will work every day to earn that forgiveness." In the days that followed, Marcus observed Elizabeth genuinely struggling to change her behavior patterns. It wasn't easy. Decades of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. But she was trying. Elizabeth started therapy with a psychologist specializing in personality issues and family trauma. In the first sessions, she resisted a lot, but gradually began to understand the roots of her abusive behavior. The most dramatic change was in the daily dynamics of the house. Elizabeth stopped yelling, stopped creating non-existent problems, and began treating Sarah with a basic courtesy that, although still formal, was infinitely better than the previous cruelty. Tyler noticed the difference immediately. "Daddy, why did Mommy stop yelling at Sarah?" he asked a few days later. "Because your mother realized she wasn't being fair," replied Marcus. "Sometimes adults make mistakes and need to learn to be better." "I like it better this way," said Tyler. "Now the house is calmer." Marcus realized how much the tense environment had affected even his son, who was clearly more relaxed and happy. Sarah, in turn, was cautiously optimistic. She still kept her guard up, but Marcus could see she was beginning to relax slightly. "Dr. Marcus," she said one week after the confrontation, "may I speak with you?" "Of course, Sarah. What is it?" "I wanted to thank you for what you did. I never imagined anyone would care enough to defend me like that." "Sarah, you deserved to be defended long ago. I only regret not discovering the situation earlier." "You couldn't have known. Mrs. Elizabeth was very careful to hide how she really is." "And how are you feeling now?" "Confused mostly," admitted Sarah. "I spent so much time being afraid that now I don't quite know how to behave without this constant fear. That will take time to adjust, but you don't need to be afraid anymore. If any problem comes up, you come speak with me immediately." "Thank you, Dr. Marcus. That means a lot to me." 2 weeks later, Elizabeth was having a particularly difficult therapy session. The psychologist was helping her understand how her childhood traumas had turned into abusive behaviors in adult life. "Elizabeth," said Dr. Anderson, "can you see the connection between how you felt when your mother talked about her past and how you made Sarah feel?" Elizabeth remained silent for a long moment. "I think so. I felt diminished, like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't deserve to be where I was." "And then you passed these feelings on to Sarah?" "Yes. I made her feel like I felt, like she wasn't good enough, like she didn't deserve respect." "Why do you think you did that?" Because if she was below me, then I wasn't at the bottom of the hierarchy. If I could keep someone in an inferior position, then I was safe in my position." "And how do you feel about this realization?" "Disgusted," admitted Elizabeth. "Disgusted with myself. I became exactly the kind of person who hurt my mother." Recognizing this is the first step to breaking the cycle. Are you willing to continue working on this? "Yes, I have to be. I hurt a lot of people, and I need to learn to be better." At home, Elizabeth was trying to implement the strategies she learned in therapy. When she felt impulses to criticize Sarah unnecessarily, she would stop, take a deep breath, and try to understand where that impulse came from. It wasn't perfect. There were some moments of relapse when Elizabeth momentarily returned to old patterns. But the difference was that now she immediately recognized what she was doing and corrected herself. "Sarah," she said after an episode where she had spoken abruptly about cabinet organization. "I'm sorry. I spoke rudely. It wasn't necessary." Sarah looked surprised. "It's okay, Mrs. Elizabeth." "No, it's not okay. I promised I would treat you with respect, and that tone wasn't respectful." These small moments of accountability began building a new dynamic in the house. Sarah remained cautious but started believing the change could be real. 1 month after the revelation, Marcus was watching Elizabeth and Sarah interacting in the kitchen. Elizabeth was asking about the week's meal planning, but her tone was consultative rather than authoritarian. "Sarah, what do you think about making that lasagna Tyler loves on Thursday?" asked Elizabeth. "I think that's a good idea, Mrs. Elizabeth. I can buy the ingredients tomorrow." "Thank you. And don't forget to include something special for yourself on the shopping list too." "For me?" "Yes. You work hard here. You deserve to eat things you like too." Marcus saw tears forming in Sarah's eyes. It was the first time Elizabeth had acknowledged she had her own preferences and desires. "Thank you, Mrs. Elizabeth. That's very kind." "It's not kindness, Sarah. It's basic human respect. Something I should have shown from the beginning." That evening, Marcus talked with Elizabeth about the progress he was observing. "How are you feeling with all these changes?" he asked. "Tired," admitted Elizabeth. "It's exhausting to deconstruct patterns I built over decades, but also relieved." "Relieved how?" "I didn't realize how much energy I spent maintaining all that anger and superiority. Now that I don't need to keep up that performance anymore, I feel lighter." "And how is your relationship with Sarah?" "It's still complicated. She's still afraid of me, and I understand why. But I think she's starting to see I'm genuinely trying to change. It will take time." "I know, and she has every right to take whatever time she needs. I caused a lot of damage." Marcus felt a pang of hope. Elizabeth was showing real empathy for the first time since he'd known her. 2 months later, there was a real test of the new household dynamic. Sarah accidentally broke an expensive vase in the living room, not a worthless item like the glasses Elizabeth used to use as an excuse to yell, but a genuinely valuable vase. Marcus watched Elizabeth's reaction carefully. He saw conflict cross her face, the old impulse to explode versus the new commitment to respect. "Oh!" exclaimed Sarah, looking at the vase pieces on the floor. "Mrs. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I tripped and—" Elizabeth took a deep breath before answering. "Don't worry, Sarah, it was an accident. Are you hurt?" The question surprised Sarah, who clearly expected yelling and humiliation. "No, I'm not hurt." "That's good. Let me help you pick up the pieces." Marcus watched Elizabeth kneel down and help Sarah clean up the mess, treating her as an equal rather than a subordinate who'd made a terrible mistake. "Mrs. Elizabeth, this vase was very expensive," said Sarah, clearly feeling guilty. "It was, yes, but it's just an object, Sarah. It can be replaced. What matters is that nobody got hurt." "But, Sarah, accidents happen, to everyone. I've broken things too, and you never made me feel bad about it." Marcus saw tears in Sarah's eyes, not from fear but from gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Elizabeth, for understanding." "No need to thank me. This is how people should treat each other." That evening, Marcus talked with Elizabeth about the episode. "I'm proud of how you handled the vase situation." "It was difficult," admitted Elizabeth. "My first impulse was to yell, blame, humiliate. But then I remembered what Dr. Anderson said to stop and think before reacting." "And how did you feel after responding with understanding instead of anger?" "Good. Better than I would have felt if I had yelled. And more importantly, I saw the relief on Sarah's face. It made me realize how much fear she used to have of me. That recognition is important. Marcus, I want to ask you something honestly. Do you think one day you'll be able to forgive me completely?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Elizabeth, I think forgiveness is a process, not a single event. Each day you show real change, a little more trust is restored. We're moving in the right direction. And our marriage? Do you think it can survive? If you keep committing to this change, yes. But it won't be the same marriage we had before. It will be something new, built on honesty instead of lies. I accept that. The old marriage was based on a false version of myself anyway." 3 months after the revelation, the household dynamics had completely transformed. Sarah was more relaxed and confident. Elizabeth was learning to be a genuinely compassionate person, and Tyler was flourishing in a more harmonious home environment. "Dad," said Tyler one afternoon, "Mom is cooler now." "How so?" "She doesn't yell anymore, and she really asks about my day, not just out of politeness. And Sarah seems happier too." "How do you know Sarah is happier?" "She smiles more. And sometimes I hear her singing in the kitchen, something she never used to do before." Marcus smiled, realizing even a child could feel the positive change in the home atmosphere. That week, Sarah approached Marcus with a proposal. "Dr. Marcus, may I speak with you about an idea I had?" "Of course, Sarah. What is it?" "Well, with the raise, I managed to save some money, and I was thinking, I've always wanted to take a baking course. Would it be possible for me to do it on my days off?" Marcus was moved to see Sarah thinking about her own dreams and ambitions. "Of course it's possible. In fact, if you want, we can adjust your schedule to give you more time for the course." "You would do that?" "Sarah, you deserve to pursue your dreams. And if you learn professional baking, imagine the amazing desserts we could have here at home." Sarah laughed, a sound Marcus hadn't heard in years. "Thank you, Dr. Marcus. You don't know how much this means to me." When Marcus told Elizabeth about Sarah's request, her reaction was revealing. "Baking? What a wonderful idea!" exclaimed Elizabeth, genuinely enthusiastic. "Sarah makes delicious sweets in her spare time. A professional course will only enhance the talent she already has." "You don't think it will interfere with her work here?" "Marcus, if Sarah wants to study baking, we'll find a way to support it. Who knows, one day she might even open her own bakery." The transformation in Elizabeth's attitude toward Sarah's dreams was complete. Instead of seeing Sarah only as someone who existed to serve her, she was beginning to see Sarah as a person with her own aspirations that deserved support. 6 months after the revelation, Marcus received a surprising phone call. It was the person who had made the original anonymous calls. "Dr. Marcus, this is Rachel. I worked in your house before Sarah." "Rachel, was it you who called me?" "Yes, it was. I heard through mutual acquaintances that things have changed in your house. Is Sarah being treated better?" "Yes, she is, much better. How did you know?" "I talked to Sarah's sister at the market last week. She told me that Sarah is much happier, that Mrs. Elizabeth has completely changed." "And do you believe it's a real change?" "Well, I hope it is. Sarah is a good person. She didn't deserve to suffer like she did." "Rachel, can I ask why you waited so long to call me? And why did you call anonymously?" "I was afraid. Mrs. Elizabeth has connections with many wealthy families in the area. If she found out it was me who told, she could harm me professionally." "And you took the risk anyway?" "Yes, because I couldn't stand knowing that someone else was going through what I went through." Marcus felt deep gratitude for Rachel. "Rachel, thank you so much. If you hadn't called, I would never have discovered the truth." "And did you really confront your wife?" "I did, and she's in therapy, working to change. It wasn't easy, but she's trying." "That's good. Sarah deserves that. We all do." After hanging up, Marcus reflected on how many other domestic workers suffered in silence, protected only by fear and lack of witnesses. He decided that it wasn't enough to have resolved the situation in his own home. He needed to do more. Marcus began researching organizations that defended domestic workers' rights and got involved in awareness campaigns about labor abuse. He also implemented new protocols in his works to ensure his employees were treated with dignity and respect. 1 year after the revelation, Marcus watched Elizabeth and Sarah working together in the kitchen, planning the menu for Tyler's birthday party. The dynamic between them had evolved from employer-employee to something closer to co-workers with mutual respect. "Sarah, what do you think about making that triple chocolate cake you learned in your course?" asked Elizabeth. "I think that's a great idea. And I can make some decorated cupcakes too. The kids love them." "Perfect. And don't worry about the budget. You can buy the best quality ingredients. We want it to be perfect for Tyler." Marcus saw Sarah smile genuinely, something that had become common in the house in recent months. "Mrs. Elizabeth, can I suggest something?" "Of course. How about if we make a themed table? I saw some interesting ideas in a magazine. I love it. Let's plan together. You have good taste for these things. Marcus watched the two women discussing ideas animatedly, treating each other with respect and mutual value. It was a transformation he never imagined possible a year before. That evening, Marcus talked with Elizabeth about how much she had changed. "Sometimes I don't recognize the person I was a year ago," said Elizabeth. "How could I have been so cruel?" "What matters is that you recognized you were wrong and worked to change." "Marcus, I have a confession to make." "What is it?" "I like myself more now. Before I had to use so much energy to maintain all that false superiority. Now I can just be human. It's easier, more genuine." "And how is your relationship with Sarah?" "Better than I expected. We're not exactly friends. There's still a professional dynamic, but there's mutual respect and even moments of genuine affection." "Do you think she's forgiven you?" "For the most part, yes, but more importantly, I managed to forgive myself. And I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it allows you to build a better future." 2 years after the revelation, Sarah approached Marcus and Elizabeth with important news. "Dr. Marcus, Mrs. Elizabeth, I have something to tell you." "What is it, Sarah?" asked Elizabeth with genuine interest. "I received an offer to work at a large bakery here in Los Angeles. It would be as a professional pastry chef, using everything I learned in my course." Marcus saw conflicting emotions cross Elizabeth's face: sadness at losing Sarah, but also pride in her success. "Sarah, that's wonderful," exclaimed Elizabeth. "You managed to achieve your dream." "I did. But it's hard to think about leaving you all. This house has become my family." "And you will always be part of our family," said Elizabeth. "But this is an incredible opportunity for you. You have to accept it." "Are you sure, Mom?" "I am. Sarah, you deserve to pursue your dreams, and we will be here cheering for you." Marcus was moved to see Elizabeth genuinely happy for Sarah's success, in complete contrast to the selfish person she had been 2 years earlier. "And your sister?" asked Marcus. "How is she handling the change?" "Actually, she has news too," said Sarah, smiling. "With the physical therapy classes you helped pay for, her leg has improved a lot, and she got a job at a bookstore. She loves books, so it's perfect for her." "How wonderful," said Elizabeth. "Both of you achieving your dreams." "It's thanks to your support," said Sarah. "Especially over the last 2 years. You gave me back my dignity and self-confidence." Elizabeth was visibly emotional. "Sarah, we are the ones who should thank you. You taught us about forgiveness, about second chances, about what it really means to treat people with respect." On Sarah's last day in the house, Elizabeth organized a small farewell party. She invited some neighbors, including Mrs. Dorothy, and treated Sarah as the guest of honor. "I'd like to make a toast," said Elizabeth, raising her glass, "to Sarah, who taught us that real change is possible, that forgiveness has transformative power, and that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." "And to you, Mrs. Elizabeth," replied Sarah, raising her own glass, "who showed me that it's never too late for a person to change, and that the courage to admit mistakes is the first step to becoming who we truly want to be." Marcus watched the exchange between the two women with tears in his eyes. 2 years earlier, they were antagonists in a toxic power dynamic. Now, they were two people who had helped each other become better versions of themselves. A few months after Sarah's departure, Marcus and Elizabeth decided not to hire a new housekeeper immediately. Instead, they divided the household chores between themselves and Tyler, creating a more equal family dynamic. "Do you miss having a housekeeper?" Marcus asked Elizabeth one afternoon as they cleaned the kitchen together. "I miss Sarah specifically," said Elizabeth, "but I don't miss having someone to order around. Actually, I prefer it this way. It's more human. And less temptation to fall back into old patterns." "Exactly. And it's also good for Tyler to see that everyone in the family contributes to keeping the house running." Tyler, now 12, had become a responsible and empathetic teenager, clearly influenced by the values of equality and respect he had observed in recent years. "Dad, Mom," he said one night during dinner, "can I invite Sarah to come for dinner here on my birthday next month?" "Of course," Elizabeth said immediately. It would be great to see her again. And her sister too. Definitely. Her whole family is always welcome here. Marcus smiled, seeing how Tyler had learned to value relationships based on affection and mutual respect, regardless of social class. 3 years after the initial revelation, Marcus reflected on all the changes that had occurred. His undercover investigation had started as a way to uncover the truth about his wife, but it had turned into a journey of personal growth for the whole family. Elizabeth had not only changed her behavior, but had become a genuinely more compassionate and empathetic person. She now volunteered with workers' rights organizations and spoke openly about her experience of personal change. Sarah was thriving in her new career, but maintained regular contact with the family. She often sent photos of the elaborate cakes she created, and Marcus and Elizabeth always responded with pride and encouragement. Sarah's sister had not only recovered physically, but had discovered a passion for literature that led her to write her own blog about books. And Marcus had learned the importance of never assuming he fully knew the people in his life. He had implemented changes in his business that significantly improved his employees' working conditions and had become an active advocate for workers' rights. One afternoon, Marcus was in the garden when he received a call from Sarah. "Dr. Marcus, I have amazing news to share." "What is it, Sarah?" "I've saved enough money to open my own bakery. It'll be small at first, but it's mine." Marcus was thrilled with the news. "Sarah, that's fantastic. Elizabeth will be so happy when she finds out. And there's more. I want you to be the first customers when I open." "Not just customers," said Marcus. "We want to be investors too, if you'll accept. A business like this deserves all the support possible." "Dr. Marcus, I don't know what to say. You've already done so much for me." "Sarah, this isn't a favor. It's an investment in a talented person who's going to succeed. And besides, your family. That's what families do for each other." Marcus heard Sarah crying on the other end of the line, tears of gratitude and happiness. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything. For seeing me as a person, for supporting me, for teaching me that I deserved more than I thought I deserved." When Marcus shared the news with Elizabeth, she beamed. "We have to organize an opening party for her," exclaimed Elizabeth, "and invite all of her family and some of the neighbors who know her." Marcus smiled, seeing Elizabeth's genuine happiness for Sarah's success. It was a complete transformation from the woman who 3 years earlier saw employees merely as objects for her personal use. 6 months later, Marcus, Elizabeth, and Tyler were at the grand opening of Sarah's Sweetness, the small bakery that had become a reality. The place was full of friends, family, and curious customers, drawn by the delicious aromas coming from the kitchen. "Thank you all for being here today," Sarah told the small crowd gathered. "This bakery represents more than a dream come true. It represents the power of second chances, forgiveness, and the belief that we can always become better versions of ourselves." Elizabeth approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for giving me the chance to redeem myself. Thank you for showing me that real change is possible. Mrs. Elizabeth, thank you for having the courage to change. It wasn't easy for any of us, but it was worth it." The two women embraced, no longer as employer and employee, but as two people who had helped each other grow and become better. Marcus watched the scene and reflected on the extraordinary journey they had taken. 3 years earlier, he had disguised himself as a plumber to discover who his wife really was. What he discovered had almost destroyed his family. But instead of simply accepting that reality, they had chosen the more difficult path, the path of change, forgiveness, and personal growth. It hadn't been easy. It had required painful confrontations, admissions of wrongdoing, intensive therapy, and a daily commitment to being better. But the result had been a stronger family, more genuine relationships, and the satisfaction of knowing they had helped at least one person achieve her dreams. Tyler approached Marcus during the party. "Dad, I'm proud of how our family has changed." "Why, son?" "Because you taught me that we can always choose to be better, and that sometimes the people who most need forgiveness are the ones who seem to deserve it the least." Marcus hugged his son, realizing that perhaps the greatest victory of that entire journey was having raised a child with strong values of empathy and justice. That night, driving home after the grand opening party, Marcus drove in silence while Elizabeth and Tyler dozed off in the back seat. He thought about how a single decision, the decision to investigate the anonymous accusations instead of ignoring them, had completely changed the course of their lives. If he had ignored the calls, Sarah would still be suffering, Elizabeth would still be cruel, Tyler would grow up in a toxic environment, and he would continue living a lie about who his wife was. Instead, they had faced the truth, no matter how painful it was, and from that truth, something better than anything that existed before had been born. Marcus parked in the garage and looked at his house, the same house where so much cruelty had occurred, but which was now a home built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. Elizabeth woke up when the car stopped. "Are we here?" she asked sleepily. "We're home," Marcus replied. But as they walked to the door, Marcus realized that home meant something very different now. It was no longer just a house where wealthy people lived, served by employees. It was a home where imperfect people worked daily to be better, where mistakes were admitted and corrected, where personal growth was valued above social appearances. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt truly proud of the life he had built with his family. End of story. So, what did you think of this transformation? Do you believe people can really change like Elizabeth did? Tell us in the comments which part of the story moved you the most and how you see the issues of respect and dignity in domestic work. If this story touched you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that show the power of change and forgiveness. Your opinion is very important to us.